The first snowflake landed on Josephine Jensen's bare shoulder as she stood outside the Lucky Dust Saloon in Cimarron, New Mexico territory, watching the November sky turn gray with the promise of an early winter that would change everything. She pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders and hurried back inside, where the warmth of the wood stove and the smell of tobacco and whiskey greeted her like old friends she had never wanted to make. The saloon was nearly empty at this hour, just past noon, with only a few regulars nursing their drinks at corner tables. Josephine made her way behind the bar where Mabel, the other saloon girl, was wiping down glasses with a rag that had seen better days. "Getting cold out there," Josephine said, rubbing her arms. "Frank says this winter is going to be harsh." Mabel glanced up, her weathered face showing the years she had spent in places like this. She was only 35 but looked 50. "Then you better smile prettier for the customers, honey. Winter means more men stuck in town with nothing to do but drink and gamble. Means more money for Frank and maybe a few extra coins for us if we are lucky." Josephine nodded, though the thought made her stomach turn. She had been working at the Lucky Dust for 3 months now, ever since her father died of fever and left her with nothing but debts she could not pay. The banker had taken their small house on the edge of town, and suddenly, Josephine had found herself with 2 choices: work at the saloon or starve. She had chosen survival, though some days she wondered if there was really much difference between the two. She was 21 years old, and this was not the life she had imagined for herself. Her mother had died when she was 12, and her father, despite his failings, had tried to raise her right. He had taught her to read and write, rare skills for a woman in these parts, and had always told her she deserved better than what this hard territory offered. But deserving and receiving were 2 different things, Josephine had learned. The afternoon passed slowly. A few cowboys drifted in as the light faded, men from the surrounding ranches coming to town for supplies and staying for the whiskey. Josephine served them with a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes, deflecting their crude comments with the skill of someone who had learned quickly how to survive in this world. She poured drinks, laughed at jokes that were not funny, and counted the hours until she could retreat to the small room she rented above the general store. It was nearly sunset when he walked in. Josephine noticed him immediately, not because he was particularly handsome, though he was, but because of the way he carried himself. Most men who came into the Lucky Dust were loud and looking for trouble, or so worn down by life that they had given up pretending otherwise. This man was different. He was tall, probably 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean build of someone who worked hard for a living. His hat was pulled low, but she could see dark hair curling at his collar and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. He wore working clothes, a worn leather vest over a dark shirt, denim pants faded from sun and work, and boots that had seen a lot of miles. What struck her most were his eyes when he finally looked up. They were a startling blue, the color of the sky on a clear winter morning, and they held an intelligence and steadiness that was rare in these parts. He approached the bar and removed his hat, revealing more of his face. He was young, maybe 25 or 26, with weathered skin that spoke of days spent outdoors. "Whiskey, please," he said, and his voice was quiet, almost polite. Josephine poured him a glass, setting it in front of him with a practiced motion. "Just passing through?" She asked, the question automatic. He shook his head. "I have a ranch about 10 miles north of here. Oak Valley Ranch, just me and a few hands working it." He took a sip of his whiskey, and she noticed his hands were calloused but clean. "Name is Owen Yates." "Josephine Jensen," she said, surprised that he had introduced himself properly. Most men did not bother with formalities with saloon girls. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Jensen," he said, and the way he said "Miss" instead of something cruder made her look at him more closely. "It has been a while since anyone called me that," she admitted before she could stop herself. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of understanding or perhaps sadness. "Seems to me a woman deserves respect regardless of where she works." Josephine did not know what to say to that, so she turned to help another customer, but she found herself acutely aware of Owen Yates sitting at her bar for the rest of the evening. He did not get drunk like most of the men. He nursed his whiskey slowly, watching the room with those steady blue eyes, and when drunk cowboys got too rowdy, she noticed how his posture shifted, ready to intervene if needed. Around 9 o'clock, one of the regulars, a mean drunk named Charlie Peterson, grabbed Josephine's wrist as she passed his table. "Why don't you sit with me a while, pretty girl?" His grip was tight, painful, and his breath reeked of rot-gut whiskey. "I am working, Charlie." "Let go," Josephine said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I said sit down," Charlie growled, yanking her toward him. Before Josephine could react, Owen Yates was there. He did not move fast exactly, but there was a quiet purpose to his movements. His hand closed over Charlie's wrist. "The lady said let go." Charlie looked up, his drunk mind taking a moment to process the situation. "This is none of your business, stranger." "I am making it my business," Owen said, his voice still quiet but with an edge of steel. "Let her go now." There was a moment where the whole saloon seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if it would turn into a fight. Charlie must have seen something in Owen's eyes, because he released Josephine's wrist and slumped back in his chair, muttering curses under his breath. Owen waited a moment longer, then turned to Josephine. "You all right?" she nodded, rubbing her wrist. "Thank you. You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," he said simply, and returned to his seat at the bar. The rest of the evening passed without incident, but Josephine could not stop thinking about the cowboy who had defended her. When the saloon finally closed around midnight, Owen was one of the last to leave. He placed a few coins on the bar, more than enough for his drinks, and put his hat back on. "Good night, Miss Jensen," he said. "Stay safe." "Good night, Mr. Yates," she replied, and watched him walk out into the cold November night. She did not expect to see him again, but she was wrong. Owen Yates came back 3 days later and then again the following week. He always sat at the bar, always ordered whiskey, and always treated Josephine with the same quiet respect. They began to talk, short conversations between her other customers, and Josephine found herself looking forward to his visits in a way that both thrilled and frightened her. She learned that he was 26 years old, originally from Missouri. He had come west 5 years ago after his parents died of cholera, looking for a fresh start. He had worked on various ranches, saving every penny until he could finally buy a small spread of his own. Oak Valley Ranch was not much, he told her, just a modest house and enough land for cattle and horses, but it was his and he was proud of it. "It gets lonely out there," he admitted one evening about a month after they first met. December had arrived with brutal cold and snow blanketed the town. "Just me and the hands, and they keep to the bunkhouse mostly. Sometimes I go days without having a real conversation." "Is that why you come here?" Josephine asked, wiping down the bar. "For conversation?" Owen looked at her with those steady blue eyes. "I come here to see you, Josephine." "I thought that was obvious." Her heart skipped a beat. "Mr. Yates, I am not that kind of woman. I serve drinks, nothing more." "I know that," he said quietly. "That is not why I come. I come because talking to you is the best part of my week. You are intelligent and kind, and you deserve better than this place." Josephine felt her cheeks flush. No man had ever spoken to her like this before. "You do not know anything about me." "Then tell me," Owen said. "Tell me about yourself." And she did. Over the following weeks, as winter deepened, and the snow piled higher in the streets of Cimarron, Josephine found herself sharing her story with Owen Yates. She told him about her childhood, about her mother's death and her father's struggles, about the debts and the loss of their home. She told him about the choice she had made to work at the Lucky Dust, and the shame she felt every day, even though she knew she had done nothing wrong. Owen listened to all of it without judgment, and in turn, he shared more of himself. He told her about the loneliness of the frontier, about the challenges of running a ranch with limited resources, about his dream of building something lasting in this hard territory. He talked about wanting a family someday, children to carry on after him, but admitted he had not met a woman who could love the harsh life a ranch demanded. "It is not an easy life," he said one evening in mid-December. The saloon was quieter than usual, many people staying home because of the bitter cold. The work is hard from sunup to sundown, and there are no guarantees. A harsh winter can kill your cattle. Drought can destroy you. It takes a strong woman to build a life out here. "You think women are not strong enough?" Josephine challenged, raising an eyebrow. Owen smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "I think women are plenty strong. My mother proved that. She survived things that would have broken most men. I just mean it takes a particular kind of courage to choose this life, to build something from nothing and keep building even when everything seems set against you." "That sounds like every woman I have ever known," Josephine said softly. "We are always building lives from nothing." Owen looked at her for a long moment. "You are right. I suppose the difference is I am offering a choice, not an obligation." Josephine did not understand what he meant by that, not yet, but she would soon. Christmas came and went, celebrated in Cimarron with what little cheer people could muster in the brutal cold. The Lucky Dust stayed open, of course, and Josephine spent Christmas Eve serving drinks to lonely men far from home. Owen did not come to the saloon that night, and she told herself she was not disappointed, though she was. But on Christmas Day, when the saloon was blessedly closed, and Josephine was huddled in her small rented room trying to keep warm, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Owen standing there, snow dusting his shoulders, holding a small wrapped package. "Merry Christmas," he said, looking almost shy. "Mr. Yates, what are you doing here?" Josephine asked, surprised and flustered. "How did you even know where I live, Mrs. Henshaw at the general store told me when I bought supplies last week," he admitted. "I hope you do not mind. I wanted to give you this." He held out the package, and Josephine took it with trembling fingers. She unwrapped it carefully to reveal a beautiful pair of leather gloves, soft and well-made, lined with warm fleece. "Your hands were cold the other night at the saloon," Owen explained. "I thought these might help." Josephine felt tears prick her eyes. No one had given her a Christmas gift since her father died. "I cannot accept this. It is too much. Please," Owen said. "I want you to have them." She looked down at the gloves, then back up at him. "I do not have anything for you." "That is all right," he said. "Your company has been gift enough." They stood there in the doorway, the cold wind swirling snow around them, and Josephine felt something shift in her chest. This man, this kind and steady man, saw her as more than just a saloon girl. He saw her as a person worthy of respect and kindness. "Would you like to come in?" she asked. "I do not have much, but I could make us some coffee." Owen's face lit up. "I would like that very much." He stepped inside, and Josephine closed the door against the cold. Her room was small and sparse, just a bed, a chair, a small table, and a wood stove that struggled to keep the space warm. But she made coffee with the last of her grounds, and they sat together talking for hours. It was the best Christmas Josephine had experienced in years. After that day, something changed between them. Owen's visits to the saloon became more frequent, and their conversations grew deeper and more personal. Josephine found herself thinking about him constantly, imagining a different life, one where she was not serving drinks to drunk cowboys but building something meaningful with a good man. But she did not dare hope. Women like her, women who worked in saloons, did not get happy endings. That was not how the world worked. January arrived with even harsher weather. The temperature dropped so low that water froze solid in basins overnight, and going outside felt like stepping into a knife's edge. The lucky dust was busy with men seeking refuge from the cold, and Josephine worked long hours, coming home exhausted every night to her freezing room. She was getting sick, she knew. The cold and the long hours and the poor food were taking their toll. She developed a cough that would not go away, and her hands shook even when she wore the gloves Owen had given her. One evening in late January, she was serving drinks when she felt the room start to spin. She grabbed the edge of the bar to steady herself, but her legs gave out and she collapsed. She woke up to find herself lying on the floor with several people standing over her, including Owen, who must have been there without her noticing. His face was pale with concern. "Somebody get the doctor," he said sharply, then knelt beside her. "Josephine, can you hear me?" "I am fine," she tried to say, but her voice came out as a whisper. "Just tired." "You are not fine," Owen said. He turned to Frank, the saloon owner, who was standing nearby looking annoyed. "She needs a doctor." "Doctor costs money," Frank said. "She can rest in the back room until she is ready to work again." Owen stood up, and Josephine had never seen him angry before, but he was angry now. "She is not working tonight. She is sick and she needs proper care." "Who are you to tell me how to run my business?" Frank demanded. "I am someone who actually cares whether she lives or dies," Owen shot back. "Now either get her a doctor or I will, and if I do, she will not be coming back to work in this place." Frank's face turned red. "You trying to steal one of my girls?" "She is not your girl," Owen said. "She is a human being who deserves better than this. And yes, if she is willing, I am taking her out of here right now." The saloon had gone quiet, everyone watching the confrontation. Josephine tried to sit up, her head still spinning. "Owen, please do not make trouble for yourself." He turned to her and his expression softened. "Josephine, you are dying here, this place, this work, it is killing you. I cannot stand by and watch that happen." He took a breath. "Come with me. Come to the ranch. I will take care of you, get you healthy again. You can have a respectable life." "As what?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Your charity case, as my wife," Owen said, and the saloon erupted in murmurs and whispers. "If you will have me." "I know this is not how these things are usually done, and I know we have not known each other long by some standards, but I also know that I care about you more than I have ever cared about anyone. Marry me, Josephine. Let me give you the life you deserve." Josephine stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You cannot be serious. You cannot want to marry someone like me." Owen knelt beside her again and took her hands in his. "I want to marry you, not someone like you, but you specifically. You are smart and strong and kind, and you have survived things that would have destroyed other people. I would be honored if you would be my wife." Tears were streaming down Josephine's face now. "People will talk. They will say terrible things about both of us." "Let them talk," Owen said. "I do not care what other people think. I care about you. So, what do you say, Josephine Jensen? Will you marry me?" She looked into his blue eyes and saw nothing but sincerity and hope. This man was offering her a way out, not just from the saloon but from the life she had been trapped in. He was offering her respect, security, and something she had almost forgotten existed, a future. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Owen smiled, that rare expression that transformed his whole face, and gently helped her to her feet. "Then let us get you out of here." He turned to Frank. "Whatever wages you owe her, I will settle up now." Frank, still looking angry but perhaps recognizing that he had lost this battle, named a sum that was probably less than he actually owed Josephine. Owen paid it without argument, then wrapped Josephine in his coat and guided her toward the door. As they stepped out into the frigid January night, Josephine looked back at the Lucky Dust Saloon one last time. She had spent months of her life in that place, months that had felt like years, and she was leaving it behind forever. The thought should have frightened her, stepping into the unknown with a man she barely knew, but instead she felt nothing but relief and a cautious, fragile hope. Owen had a horse hitched outside. He lifted Josephine into the saddle like she weighed nothing, then climbed up behind her, wrapping his arms around her to keep her steady and warm. "My ranch is about an hour's ride from here. Do you think you can make it?" Josephine nodded, leaning back against his solid warmth. "I can make it." They rode through the dark, frozen landscape, the only sounds the horses' hooves crunching through snow and the wind howling across the plains. Josephine drifted in and out of awareness, her fever making everything feel dreamlike and unreal. Owen held her securely, murmuring reassurances when she stirred. By the time they reached Oak Valley Ranch, Josephine was only dimly aware of her surroundings. She had impressions of a sturdy log house, larger than she expected, with smoke rising from the chimney. Owen carried her inside, and she felt warmth wash over her, blessed warmth after so many months of being cold. "James Thomas, I need help," Owen called out, and two men appeared, ranch hands she assumed. They looked surprised to see their boss carrying a semi-conscious woman but did not ask questions. "Thomas, ride to town and fetch Dr. Miller. Tell him it is urgent." "James, help me get the fire going stronger and heat some water." The men moved quickly to follow orders. Owen carried Josephine to a bedroom and laid her gently on a bed that was softer and more comfortable than anything she had slept on in months. He removed her worn shoes and covered her with heavy quilts. "The doctor will be here soon," he said, brushing damp hair back from her forehead. "You are going to be all right. You are safe now." Josephine wanted to thank him, to tell him how grateful she was, but exhaustion pulled her under before she could form the words. She slept fitfully, aware sometimes of voices, of someone helping her drink water or broth, of cool cloths on her forehead. She dreamed of her father and her childhood home, of better times before everything fell apart. When she finally woke fully, it was daylight. Weak winter sun filtered through curtains, and she could hear the sound of men working outside, the lowing of cattle. She was in a large bed in a well-built room with log walls and simple but sturdy furniture. The quilts covering her were handmade and warm. The door opened and Owen entered, carrying a tray. His face brightened when he saw she was awake. "You are back with us. How do you feel?" Josephine took inventory of her body. Her head still ached and her throat was sore, but the terrible spinning weakness had passed. "Better. How long have I been here?" "3 days," Owen said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "Dr. Miller said you had pneumonia and exhaustion. He gave us medicine and said you needed rest and good food. You have been sleeping mostly. 3 days." Josephine tried to sit up and realized she was wearing a clean nightgown, not her own. "Who?" "Mrs. Miller helped with that," Owen said quickly, understanding her concern. "The doctor's wife. She came out to help nurse you. Everything has been proper, I promise." Josephine felt herself blush at her own assumptions. "I am sorry. I did not mean to imply." "It is all right," Owen said. "You have every right to be cautious. Here, Dr. Miller said you should eat when you woke. It is just broth and bread, but it will help you regain your strength." He helped her sit up, propping pillows behind her, and handed her the bowl of broth. It was warm and savory, the best thing she had tasted in months. She ate slowly, aware of Owen watching her with those steady blue eyes. "You saved my life," she said after a while. "At the saloon, you said." "I proposed to you," Owen finished. "And you accepted. That is, if you still want to. I know you are not well, and I do not want you to feel obligated because I brought you here. If you want to leave, I will take you anywhere you want to go and give you enough money to start over, but I hope you will stay." Josephine set down the bowl and looked at him directly. Why me? You could have any woman. You have a ranch, a good life to offer. Why would you choose someone who worked in a saloon?" Owen was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "Do you remember the first night I came into the Lucky Dust? There was a moment when you looked at me, and I saw something in your eyes. You were tired and sad, but there was still hope there, still fire. Most people in your position would have given up, would have let the world turn them hard and bitter. But you did not. You kept going. That takes real strength, Josephine." He paused. "And if I am being completely honest, I fell in love with you that first night. I have been in love with you every day since." Josephine felt her heart swell with emotion. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have for weeks now, but I did not let myself believe this could happen." Owen reached out and took her hand. "It can happen. It is happening. We can build a life together if you want that." "I do want that," Josephine said, "more than anything." He smiled, that rare, wonderful smile. "Then we will. As soon as you are well enough, we will go to town and find the preacher. We will do this right." Over the next 2 weeks, Josephine recovered her strength. True to his word, Owen kept everything proper. She had her own room, and Mrs. Miller came by regularly to check on her and serve as chaperone. The doctor's wife was a kind woman in her 50s who seemed genuinely pleased that Owen had found someone. "That boy has been alone too long," she told Josephine one afternoon as they sat in the kitchen. "He needed someone to share his life with. I am glad he found you, dear. And do not you worry about what anyone in town says. Those who matter will judge you by who you are now, not by what you had to do to survive." Josephine hoped she was right, but she knew the reality of small towns. People would talk, would judge, would assume the worst. But when she looked at Owen, at the life he was offering, she decided it was worth facing the gossip. As she grew stronger, Josephine began to explore the ranch. Oak Valley was modest but well-maintained. The house had 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living area, and even a small study where Owen kept his books and accounts. Outside were a barn, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, corrals for horses, and grazing land that stretched to the horizon. Owen ran about 100 head of cattle, he told her, enough to make a living but not so many that he could not manage with just his 2 hands and seasonal help. "It is not fancy," Owen admitted as he showed her around one sunny February afternoon. The weather had warmed slightly, and Josephine was wrapped in a warm coat Owen had bought for her. "But it is ours. We can build it up over the years, grow the herd, maybe add on to the house when children come." "Children," Josephine repeated, the word both wonderful and terrifying. She had never let herself imagine having children, not when her life was so unstable. Owen stopped walking and turned to her. "I am sorry, I am getting ahead of myself. We have not even married yet, and I am already planning our family." "No, it is all right," Josephine said quickly. "I want children someday. I want all of it, a real home, a family. I just never thought I could have those things." "You can," Owen said, taking her hands. "We both can, together." 3 weeks after that night at the saloon, Josephine had recovered enough that they could make plans for the wedding. Owen wanted to do things properly, which meant going to town and arranging for the preacher to marry them in the small church. Josephine was nervous about returning to Cimarron. She knew people would stare, would whisper, would judge, but Owen seemed unconcerned. "Let them think what they want," he said as they rode into town on a mild February morning. "We know the truth." They went first to the general store to buy fabric for a dress. Mrs. Henshaw, the owner, looked surprised to see Josephine but greeted her politely enough. "Heard you left the Lucky Dust," she said as she measured out yards of blue cotton. "People have been talking." "I imagine they have," Josephine said, keeping her voice steady. "Well, for what it is worth, I think Owen Yates is a good man," Mrs. Henshaw continued. "And anyone who says different can answer to my husband. We have known Owen since he first came to these parts, and he has always been honest and hardworking. If he has chosen you, then that is good enough for us." Josephine felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected kindness. "Thank you, Mrs. Henshaw. That means more than you know." Next, they went to see Reverend Thomas at the church. The minister was an older man with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He listened as Owen explained the situation, leaving out the details but making it clear that he and Josephine wanted to marry as soon as possible. "I am happy to perform the ceremony," Reverend Thomas said. "But I do need to know, are you both entering this marriage of your own free will?" "Miss Jensen, you are not being coerced in any way." Josephine met his eyes directly. "No, sir. I am marrying Owen because I love him and because he has offered me a chance at a good life. There is no coercion, only gratitude and hope." The Reverend smiled. "That is all I needed to hear. How does Sunday sound? That gives you a few days to prepare." They agreed, and as they left the church, Josephine felt lighter than she had in years. This was really happening. She was going to marry Owen Yates and start a new life. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Mrs. Miller helped Josephine make a simple but pretty dress from the blue cotton. It was not fancy, but it was new and clean and made Josephine feel beautiful in a way she had almost forgotten. Owen borrowed a wagon and took her to the nearby town of Springer to buy a few personal items and some supplies for the house. It was a long trip, but Josephine enjoyed seeing more of the territory and spending the day with Owen. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing dreams and stories, learning more about each other with every mile. "I want you to know," Owen said as they drove home in the evening light, "that I do not expect you to be someone you are not. Some men want wives who are quiet and obedient, but that is not what I am looking for. I want a partner, someone who will help me make decisions and build this ranch. Your opinions matter to me, Josephine." Josephine looked at him with wonder. "You are unlike any man I have ever known." "I hope that is a good thing," Owen said with a small smile. "It is the best thing," she replied. Sunday arrived bright and cold. Josephine woke early in Owen's house, in the room that had become hers over the past weeks. Mrs. Miller arrived before breakfast to help her get ready, bringing flowers she had managed to find despite the late winter weather. "Every bride needs flowers," she said, fashioning them into a simple bouquet. Josephine put on her new blue dress and let Mrs. Miller arrange her dark hair. She had gained weight over the past weeks, good food and rest filling out her too thin frame, and her cheeks had color again. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked healthy, happy, hopeful. Owen knocked on the door around 10 o'clock. "Are you ready?" he called through the door. "Yes," Josephine said, her heart pounding with nervous excitement. She opened the door and saw Owen's eyes widen. He was wearing his best clothes, a clean white shirt, dark vest, and pressed trousers. His hair was neatly combed and he had shaved. He looked impossibly handsome. "You are beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "So are you," Josephine replied, then laughed at herself. "Handsome, I mean." He grinned and offered her his arm. "Shall we go get married?" They rode to town in the wagon. with James and Thomas following on horseback to serve as witnesses. The church was small and simple, with rough-hewn pews and a plain wooden cross above the altar. A few townspeople had gathered, curious about the wedding or perhaps genuinely wishing them well. Josephine spotted Mrs. Henshaw and her husband, and the doctor and Mrs. Miller, and a few other faces that looked friendly. She also saw a few women from the Lucky Dust, including Mabel, who gave her a small wave and a genuine smile. Frank was not there, which was a relief. Reverend Thomas stood at the front of the church, his Bible open in his hands. Owen led Josephine down the short aisle, and they stood together before the altar. The ceremony was simple and traditional. The Reverend spoke about the sanctity of marriage, about love and commitment and the building of a life together. He asked them to make their vows to each other before God and these witnesses. Owen Yates, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, as long as you both shall live? I do, Owen said, his voice clear and certain. Josephine Jensen, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, as long as you both shall live? Josephine looked into Owen's blue eyes and saw her future there. I do. They exchanged simple gold bands that Owen had purchased in Springer, and then Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, he said with a smile. Owen cupped Josephine's face gently in his hands and kissed her, a soft, sweet kiss full of promise. The small congregation applauded, and Josephine felt tears of joy slip down her cheeks. They were married. After everything she had been through, all the hardship and loss and struggle, Josephine had found happiness with a good man who loved her. It felt like a miracle. After the ceremony, several townspeople came forward to offer congratulations. Mrs. Henshaw hugged Josephine and told her she was welcome at the store anytime. Dr. and Mrs. Miller wished them well and made them promise to visit soon. Even a few people Josephine did not know approached to shake Owen's hand and welcome her to the community. Mabel from the saloon waited until most people had left, then approached Josephine. I am happy for you, honey, she said. You got out. You got your happy ending. I wish you could too, Josephine said, taking her old friend's hands. Mabel shrugged. Maybe someday. But today is about you. You be happy, you hear. You deserve it. They hugged, and Josephine promised herself that someday, when she and Owen were more established, she would try to help the women still trapped in places like the Lucky Dust. Finally, it was time to go home. Owen helped Josephine into the wagon, and they began the journey back to Oak Valley Ranch. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and the winter landscape looked beautiful instead of harsh. How does it feel to be Mrs. Yates? Owen asked as they rode. Josephine smiled, testing out the name in her mind. It feels wonderful. It feels right. When they arrived at the ranch, Owen surprised her by stopping the wagon before they reached the house. I want to carry you over the threshold, he explained. I know it is traditional, and I want to do this right. He lifted her easily in his arms and carried her to the door, which James had kindly opened for them. Owen carried her inside and set her down gently in the living room. Welcome home, Mrs. Yates, he said. Josephine looked around the house, seeing it with new eyes now. This was her home. Not a rented room, not a space she was borrowing, but her actual home. She could make changes here, put down roots, build a life. Thank you, she said, turning to Owen. Thank you for everything, for seeing me as more than what I was forced to become, for offering me this life, for loving me. Owen pulled her close. You never have to thank me for loving you. That is the easiest thing I have ever done. They stood there holding each other as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared. James and Thomas had tactfully retreated to the bunkhouse, giving the newlyweds their privacy. "Are you hungry?" Owen asked eventually. "Mrs. Miller left us some food in the kitchen." They ate a simple supper together, talking and laughing, comfortable with each other in a way that felt natural despite the newness of their marriage. After dinner, Owen showed Josephine that he had moved his things to one of the other bedrooms. "I thought you might want time to adjust," he said. "I do not want you to feel rushed into anything. We can take this as slowly as you need." Josephine was touched by his consideration, but she shook her head. "Owen, I do not need time. I want to be your wife in every way. I love you and I trust you." Owen's expression softened. "I love you too. More than I can properly put into words." That night, they truly became husband and wife, and Josephine discovered that intimacy with someone you loved, someone who respected and cherished you, was nothing like the crude propositions she had fended off at the saloon. Owen was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cared for, and when they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, Josephine felt a peace she had never known before. The next days and weeks fell into a routine that Josephine found deeply satisfying. She woke each morning beside her husband, prepared breakfast for Owen and the ranch hands, and spent her days managing the household and learning the rhythms of ranch life. It was hard work, but it was honest work, and it was hers. Owen taught her to ride properly, not just sitting in a wagon but actually controlling a horse. At first, she was nervous, but Owen was a patient teacher, and soon she was riding out with him to check the cattle and survey the land. "You are a natural," he said one sunny March morning as they rode together across the ranch. The snow was melting, revealing the brown grass underneath, and there was a feeling of renewal in the air. "I like it," Josephine admitted. "I like being out here, being part of this." She also began to make friends in the community. Mrs. Henshaw invited her to join a sewing circle that met every other week, and while Josephine was nervous at first about how the other women would treat her, she found that most were welcoming. There were a few who kept their distance, and she sometimes caught whispers when she walked by, but she held her head high and refused to let small-minded people diminish her happiness. Spring arrived, and with it came the busiest time of year on the ranch. There was calving to manage, fences to repair, and preparations for the summer drive to market. Owen worked from dawn to well past dark, and Josephine worked alongside him when she could, learning more about ranching with each passing day. One evening in late April, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Josephine realized something that filled her with both joy and nervousness. "Owen," she said carefully, "I think I might be with child." Owen turned to her, his eyes wide. "Are you sure?" "I am not certain, but all the signs are there. I thought we should see Dr. Miller to confirm it." Owen let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "We are going to have a baby. Josephine, we are going to be parents." His happiness was infectious, and Josephine found herself laughing and crying at the same time. "We need to be careful. I do not want to get too excited until we know for sure." "Too late," Owen said, grinning. "I am already excited." They rode to town the next day, and Dr. Miller confirmed what Josephine suspected. She was indeed pregnant, probably about 2 months along, which meant the baby would arrive sometime in November. "You are healthy and strong," the doctor told her. "I see no reason why you should not have a normal pregnancy and delivery. Just take care of yourself, eat well, get plenty of rest, and come see me if anything feels wrong." Over the following months, Josephine bloomed with pregnancy. Her body changed, her belly growing round with their child, and Owen treated her like she was made of glass, constantly worrying about her doing too much. "I am not sick," she told him one day in July when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I am just pregnant." Women have been working while pregnant since the beginning of time. "I know," Owen said, "but you are my wife, and this is my child, and I want both of you safe and healthy." His protectiveness was endearing, even if it was sometimes excessive. Josephine had never felt so cherished in her life. As summer turned to fall, they began preparing for the baby's arrival. Josephine sewed baby clothes from soft cotton fabric, and Owen built a cradle from wood he carefully selected and sanded smooth. They chose one of the bedrooms to turn into a nursery, and Josephine painted the walls a cheerful yellow. "Whether it is a boy or a girl, they will be loved," Owen said as they stood in the finished nursery one October evening. "They will know they are wanted and valued." "They will," Josephine agreed, resting her hand on her large belly. "They will have the childhood I dreamed of but never quite had. They will be safe and loved and have every opportunity we can give them." Owen wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands covering hers on her belly. "We are going to be a family. A real family." November arrived with cold wind and the promise of winter. Josephine's due date was approaching, and she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had helped with births before, knew the basics of what to expect. But this was her child, her body, and the reality of it was overwhelming. On a cold night in mid-November, almost exactly a year after that first snowflake had landed on her shoulder outside the Lucky Dust Saloon, Josephine's labor began. Owen immediately rode to fetch Dr. Miller and Mrs. Miller, who had agreed to serve as midwife. By the time they arrived, Josephine's contractions were coming strong and regular. Mrs. Miller took charge, sending Owen to boil water and gather clean towels, giving him tasks to keep him from hovering anxiously. Labor was long and painful, and there were moments when Josephine wondered if she had the strength to continue. But Mrs. Miller was a steady, calming presence, and whenever Josephine could hear Owen's voice from the other room, speaking words of encouragement, she found the will to keep going. Finally, after hours of struggle, she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby's first cry. "It is a boy," Mrs. Miller announced, placing the squirming, wailing infant on Josephine's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." Josephine looked down at her son, this tiny perfect human she and Owen had created, and felt a love so overwhelming it took her breath away. He had dark hair like both his parents and was already showing the signs of having Owen's strong features. "Can I come in?" Owen called from outside the door, his voice anxious. "Yes, come meet your son," Dr. Miller said. Owen burst into the room and stopped short when he saw Josephine holding the baby. His eyes filled with tears as he approached the bed. "He is perfect," he whispered, reaching out a tentative finger to touch the baby's tiny hand. The infant's fingers curled around Owen's finger, and Owen made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "He is absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Josephine asked, looking up at her husband. They had discussed names over the past months, but had never quite settled on one. Owen looked at his son, considering. "What about Daniel?" he suggested. "Daniel Yates. It means God is my judge, and I like that. We are not perfect people, but we can teach him to live with integrity and let God be the final judge of his life." "Daniel," Josephine repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Daniel Owen Yates." "Daniel Owen Yates," Owen echoed, leaning down to kiss first his son and then his wife. "Welcome to the world, son." The first weeks with a newborn were exhausting but wonderful. Daniel was a good baby, healthy and strong, though he kept his parents up most nights with his need to feed. Owen was an involved father from the start, changing diapers and walking the floor with Daniel when he fussed, giving Josephine time to rest. "I never knew I could love someone this much," Owen said one night as he rocked Daniel in the living room, letting Josephine sleep. "I thought I understood love when I fell for you, but this is different. He is part of both of us, the best parts." Josephine, who had woken and come to watch them, smiled from the doorway. "We made something good together, something pure and untouched by all the hardness of the world." "We are going to protect him," Owen said fiercely. "We are going to give him everything we did not have." As winter settled in around Oak Valley Ranch, the small family grew closer. Josephine had never been happier. She who had once been forced to work in a saloon just to survive, who had thought she would never have a respectable life, now had everything she had ever dreamed of: a loving husband, a beautiful son, and a home of her own. Christmas that year was magical. They stayed at the ranch, just the three of them, and celebrated quietly. Owen had carved wooden toys for Daniel, who was still too young to appreciate them but who seemed fascinated by the bright colors Josephine had painted them. They exchanged simple gifts with each other and spent the day in peaceful contentment. "Last Christmas, I gave you gloves," Owen said as they sat by the fire that evening, Daniel sleeping peacefully in his cradle. "And I hoped even then that we might be here someday." "Did you really?" Josephine asked, snuggling closer to her husband. "I did. I knew I loved you and I knew I wanted to spend my life with you. I just did not know if you would want the same thing." "I wanted it even then," Josephine admitted. "I just did not believe it could happen for someone like me." Owen turned to look at her seriously. "You need to stop thinking of yourself that way. You are not someone like you. You are Josephine Yates, wife, mother, rancher, and one of the strongest women I have ever known. That saloon was just a place you worked for a few months when you had no other choice. It does not define you." Josephine felt tears prick her eyes. Even after a year of marriage, she sometimes struggled with the shame of her past. But Owen never let her hide in that shame. He constantly reminded her of her worth and value. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for always seeing the best in me." "It is not hard," Owen said, kissing her forehead. "You make it easy." The years that followed were good ones, filled with hard work and simple joys. The ranch prospered under their joint management, the cattle herd growing and the land producing well. Owen's reputation as an honest, hard-working rancher spread, and he began to get contracts to supply beef to the army forts and mining towns in the territory. Josephine proved to have a head for business, managing the household accounts and often suggesting improvements that increased their profits. She also became known for her kindness, always willing to help neighbors in need and active in the church and community. When Daniel was 2 years old, Josephine discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. In August of 1877, she gave birth to a daughter they named Ruth, after Josephine's mother. "Now we have one of each," Owen said, cradling his daughter while Daniel peeked curiously at his new sister. "Our family is complete." But life had one more surprise for them. 2 years after Ruth was born, Josephine found herself pregnant once more. This pregnancy was unexpected but welcome, and in June of 1879, she gave birth to twin boys they named Samuel and Joseph. "4 children," Owen said, looking slightly overwhelmed as he stood in the nursery surrounded by cribs and cradles. "We have 4 children." "We do," Josephine said, laughing at his expression. "And we will manage just fine. We have before." And they did manage. It was chaotic and exhausting, but it was also filled with love and laughter. The ranch house that had once seemed spacious now felt full of life, with children's voices echoing through the rooms and toys scattered across the floors. Owen proved to be a wonderful father, patient and loving with all his children. He taught them to ride and rope, to care for animals and work the land. But he also made sure they learned to read and write, hiring a teacher from town to come to the ranch twice a week to educate them. "Knowledge is power," he told them. "The world is changing and you need to be ready for it." Josephine taught them different lessons: kindness, compassion, resilience. She told them stories of her own childhood, edited to be appropriate for young ears but honest about the struggles she had faced. "Life is not always easy," she told Daniel one day when he was about 8 years old and had come home upset about being teased at church. "People can be cruel, especially when they do not understand something. But what matters is not what others think of you. What matters is how you treat them in return." "Did people say mean things about you, Mama?" Daniel asked, his young face serious. Josephine hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "Yes, they did. When your father and I first married, some people said unkind things because of where I used to work. But your father never cared what they thought, and eventually most people came to accept us. The ones who did not, well, that is their problem, not ours." Daniel nodded, processing this. "Papa says you are the strongest person he knows." Josephine smiled. "Your father is very kind." "It is true, though," Daniel insisted. "You take care of all of us and you help the neighbors and you are never mean to anyone even when they are mean to you. That is strength." Josephine pulled her eldest son into a hug, marveling at his wisdom. "You are going to be a good man, Daniel Yates, just like your father." The children grew, and the ranch grew with them. By the time Daniel was 12, he was working alongside Owen and the ranch hands, learning the business from the ground up. Ruth showed a talent for numbers and began helping Josephine with the accounts. The twins, Samuel and Joseph, were still young but already showing their distinct personalities. Samuel serious and thoughtful, Joseph adventurous and bold. On a warm evening in June of 1885, Josephine sat on the porch of the ranch house watching the sunset. She was 43 years old now, her dark hair showing threads of silver, her hands worn from years of work. But she was healthy and happy, surrounded by a family she loved. Owen came out to join her, sitting in the chair beside hers and taking her hand. He was 48 now, his hair also graying, lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But his blue eyes were as steady and kind as they had been the first night she met him. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Josephine smiled. "Everything. Where I was, where I am now. I was remembering the first time I saw you, walking into the lucky dust. I thought you were just another cowboy passing through. And I thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen," Owen said. "But it was more than that. There was something about you, something that made me want to know you to help you if I could." "You did more than help me," Josephine said softly. "You saved me, Owen. You gave me a life I never thought I could have." Owen shook his head. "You saved yourself, Josephine. You had the courage to say yes when I offered you a different path. You had the strength to face down the gossips and build a life here. I just gave you the opportunity. You did the real work." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as their children played in the yard. Daniel was teaching the twins to rope fence posts while Ruth sat reading under a tree. "You ever regret it?" Josephine asked suddenly. "Marrying me, I mean. Taking on all the judgment and gossip that came with it." Owen looked at her in surprise. "Not for a single second. Josephine, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and these children, this life we built together. Why would I regret the greatest blessing of my existence?" "I just wanted to be sure," Josephine said, squeezing his hand. "I wanted to thank you for everything." "You thank me every day," Owen said. "Every time you smile at me across the breakfast table, every time you work beside me on the ranch, every time I watch you with our children. That is all the thanks I need." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Josephine reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her here. 12 years ago, she had been a desperate woman working in a saloon, convinced her life was over before it had truly begun. Then a kind cowboy with steady blue eyes had offered her a respectable life, had seen worth in her when she could barely see it herself. She had taken a leap of faith, had said yes to a man she barely knew, and that decision had changed everything. She had found love, built a family, created a home. She had become part of a community, had earned respect through hard work and integrity. She had proven that a person's past does not have to define their future. The twins came running up to the porch, their faces flushed with excitement. "Mama, Papa, did you see?" "I roped the post 3 times in a row," Samuel said proudly. "I roped it 4 times, Joseph added, not to be outdone. "I saw," Owen said, laughing. "You both did well. Your brother is a good teacher." Ruth came over too, her book tucked under her arm. "Mama, can you help me with this math problem? I cannot figure out how to divide these numbers." "Of course, sweetheart," Josephine said. "Bring it inside and we will work on it together." As her children followed her into the house, chattering and laughing, Josephine felt a profound sense of gratitude and peace. This was her life now. Not perfect, not always easy, but filled with love and purpose and belonging. She was no longer the girl who worked in a saloon to survive winter. She was Josephine Yates, wife, mother, rancher, and she had built a life worth living. And it had all started with a cowboy who had the courage to offer her something better, and the wisdom to see that she was worth it. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and challenges as all years do. There were harsh winters and failed crops, sick cattle and injured horses, times when money was tight and the future uncertain. But through it all, Josephine and Owen faced everything together, their love growing deeper and stronger with each passing year. Daniel grew into a fine young man, taking on more responsibility at the ranch until he was essentially Owen's partner in running it. When he was 22, he married a girl from a neighboring ranch, a smart, capable young woman named Sarah. They built a small house on the far side of Oak Valley property, and soon Daniel and Sarah were expecting their first child. "We are going to be grandparents," Owen said one evening, still amazed by the idea. "When did we get old enough to be grandparents?" "I think it happened gradually," Josephine teased. "But I am excited. I loved being a mother. I think I will love being a grandmother even more." Ruth, at 18, had decided she wanted to be a teacher. She had gone to stay with the Millers in town so she could attend the new normal school that had opened. She came home on weekends, full of stories about her studies and her dreams of opening a school in Cimarron. The twins, now 16, were as different as 2 boys could be. Samuel wanted to stay on the ranch, was already talking about expanding the cattle operation and maybe breeding horses. Joseph, on the other hand, dreamed of seeing the world beyond New Mexico territory. He talked about California and the gold fields, about Alaska and the frontier territories. "Let him go," Josephine told Owen one night when he worried about Joseph's wanderlust. "He is young and he needs to find his own path. He will come home when he is ready." "How do you know?" Owen asked. "Because home is worth coming back to," Josephine said simply. "We built something good here. He will realize that eventually." In the spring of 1893, when Josephine was 51 and Owen 54, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Their children planned a surprise party, inviting friends and neighbors from all over the territory. The ranch house and yard were filled with people, all there to celebrate the couple who had become pillars of the community. Reverend Thomas, now quite old but still serving the church, gave a short speech. "20 years ago, I married these two people in a simple ceremony. I will admit, I had some concerns at the time. They had known each other only a few months, and there were circumstances that made some question the wisdom of their union. But I chose to trust in love, and I am glad I did. Owen and Josephine Yates have built a marriage based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and unwavering commitment. They have raised 4 wonderful children, built a successful ranch, and served this community with generosity and grace. They are an example to us all of what marriage should be. There was much applause, and Josephine felt tears slip down her cheeks. Owen squeezed her hand, and she saw that his eyes were damp as well. After the party, when all the guests had gone home and their children had retired for the night, Josephine and Owen sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. 20 years, Josephine said wonderingly. It seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. I would marry you again tomorrow, Owen said. I would marry you every day if I could. Josephine laughed. One marriage is enough, I think, but I know what you mean. I would choose you again too without hesitation. They sat watching the stars, the same stars that had watched over them on their wedding night, on the nights their children were born, on all the nights of their life together. You remember what you said to me that night at the saloon? Josephine asked. When you proposed? I said a lot of things, Owen replied. Which part? You said I deserved a respectable life, that I deserved better than what I had. I remember, Owen said. You were right, Josephine said. But what I did not understand then was that a respectable life is not something someone can give you. It is something you build day by day through your choices and actions. You gave me the opportunity, but I made it real through my own work and determination. Owen nodded. That is true. You made yourself respectable, Josephine. I just provided the circumstances. We built this together, Josephine said. The ranch, the family, the life. It took both of us. It did, Owen agreed, and I would not change a single thing. As the years moved forward, the world around them changed dramatically. New Mexico became a state, no longer a territory. The wild frontier days faded into memory, replaced by railroads and telegraph lines and all the trappings of modern civilization. But Oak Valley Ranch remained, a constant in a changing world. Joseph did eventually leave, heading to California when he was 18. He wrote letters faithfully, telling them about San Francisco and the opportunities there. But true to Josephine's prediction, he came home 3 years later, ready to settle down and help run the ranch. He had seen the world and decided that home was where he wanted to be. Ruth opened her school in Cimarron and became one of the most respected teachers in the territory, educating a generation of children. She never married, instead dedicating her life to her students, but she seemed content with her choice. Daniel and Sarah had 3 children, giving Owen and Josephine the grandchildren they adored. Samuel married a girl from Santa Fe and had 2 children of his own. Even Joseph eventually settled down, marrying a woman he met at church and starting his family. As Josephine and Owen grew older, they gradually turned over the running of the ranch to their sons. Daniel took over most of the day-to-day operations, with Samuel and Joseph helping. This gave Josephine and Owen more time to simply enjoy each other's company and the fruits of their labor. On a warm summer evening in 1905, when Josephine was 63 and Owen 66, they sat on the porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. There were 7 of them now, ranging in age from 15 to 3, all healthy and happy. We did good, Owen said, his hand finding Josephine's as naturally as breathing. Look at what we built. Josephine looked at the scene before her. The children playing, the ranch house they had expanded over the years, the land stretching to the horizon, the barn and corrals and all the signs of a thriving operation. But more than that, she saw the intangible things they had built: a family bound by love, a reputation for integrity, a legacy that would outlast them both. "We did very good," she agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible when I was standing outside that saloon watching the first snow fall." Owen smiled. "I saw you that day, you know. Before I came into the saloon, I saw you standing outside and you looked so sad and so strong at the same time. I knew right then that I wanted to know you." "You never told me that," Josephine said, surprised. "I wanted it to be romantic when I finally told you," Owen said with a sheepish grin. "But I suppose after 32 years of marriage, the romance is obvious." "It is," Josephine said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "It always has been." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had worked together for decades. This was the life she had been offered that cold winter night, the respectable life the cowboy had promised her. But it had become so much more than that. It had become a love story, a family saga, a testament to what two people could build when they had courage and faith and devotion. Josephine thought about the woman she had been, desperate and frightened, working in a saloon just to survive. She thought about the courage it had taken to say yes to Owen's proposal, to trust a man she barely knew with her future. And she thought about all the years since then, the children and the struggles and the triumphs. Every moment had been worth it. Every hardship had been overcome. Every doubt had been proven wrong. She was Josephine Yates, and she had lived a good life. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the same stars that had watched over her for all these years, Josephine felt a deep contentment settle over her. She had found her place in the world, had built something lasting and true, and she had done it all beside the man she loved, the cowboy who had seen her worth when she could barely see it herself. "I love you, Owen Yates," she said softly. "I love you too, Josephine Yates," he replied. "Today, tomorrow, and always." And as the night settled around them and their grandchildren's laughter echoed across the ranch, Josephine knew that this was exactly where she was meant to be. She had survived the winter, both literal and metaphorical, and had found spring on the other side. She had found love and family and home. She had found everything.